Have you ever felt that the harder you try to control everything in your life, your career, your relationships, even how people see you, the more everything seems to fall apart? Why is it that the more you care about things outside your control, the more chaotic your life feels? Today we're going to explore an ancient secret on how to stay calm in the middle of a storm, like a rock that stands firm, no matter how many waves crash against it. We live in an era where overthinking has become a daily habit. You lie in bed at 2 a.m., replaying an embarrassing conversation from 3 years ago, or worrying about a future that hasn't even happened yet. We often feel broken because of heartbreak, job rejections, or a lack of direction in life. In fact, we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. We let our minds torture us with labels like failure or not good enough, when in truth, it's just an ordinary event. This is where the ancient wisdom of Stoicism comes in. Epictetus, a philosopher who was once born a slave, said, "We suffer not because of what happens in our lives, but because of our judgments about what happens." In other words, when you lose a job or go through a breakup, the event itself is neutral. What makes it painful is the meaning you attach to it. Stoicism teaches us to distinguish between what we can control and what we cannot. Don't wish for things to happen the way you want. Instead, wish for things to happen as they do, and your life will flow more peacefully. Let's look at an extreme example. James Stockdale, a prisoner of war who survived 7 years in brutal captivity. What kept him alive? He accepted that he couldn't control his external circumstances, but he mastered his inner dialogue and emotions. He didn't complain, because he knew complaining wouldn't change anything. It would only weaken his character. Now, in everyday life, imagine you didn't get the promotion you wanted. Instead of saying, "I'm a failure and I'm useless," a painful judgment, you could say, "I didn't meet the requirements for that position this time," a rational fact. By changing your perspective, you stop hurting yourself and gain the energy to try again. Why does complaining actually make our suffering feel heavier? According to Stoic philosophy, complaining makes suffering feel worse because it represents a kind of mental defeat before the struggle is even over. Here's why complaining only makes things worse. Weakens your ability to endure. Marcus Aurelius believed that everything in life falls into 2 categories. If something can be endured, then complaining only makes it feel harder than it actually is. In reality, your mind has the power to interpret it as something manageable, or even beneficial, defeating yourself internally. When you allow yourself to complain, you are essentially defeating yourself from within. Complaining damages your character and weakens your control over your own mind, the very thing that should help you practice virtue in difficult situations. Intensifies suffering through judgment. Epictetus taught that we suffer not because of events, but because of our judgments about them. Complaining is an expression of strong negative judgment. When you label something as bad or unfair, you amplify your suffering, often more in your imagination than in reality. Prevents meaningful action. Complaining often becomes a barrier to taking rational action. Stoicism teaches that endurance is an active process. When you complain, you delay action and allow suffering to take control. Instead of using your internal resources to overcome the situation, destroys perspective. Complaining makes problems feel personal and overwhelming, as if they are the end of the world. In reality, hardship is a natural part of being human. Recognizing this gives you the courage to act, instead of just feeling sorry for yourself. What did Seneca mean by live immediately when facing hardship? Seneca the Younger used the idea of live immediately as a call to stop delaying action, and to stop tying your peace or happiness to an uncertain future. Here's a deeper look at what he meant. Avoid wasting your life. Seneca believed that procrastination is one of the greatest wastes of life. When you delay action, you sacrifice the present moment for a future that isn't guaranteed. In other words, you lose today while hoping for a tomorrow that may never come. Take back control from suffering. When you wait for difficulties to pass on their own, you're allowing suffering to take control over your life. But when you act now, even in small ways, you begin to reclaim that control. Perseverance is active, not passive. Endurance doesn't mean sitting still and waiting for the storm to pass. Seneca encourages us to respond to hardship with reason and to choose the most virtuous action we can take. Right now, focus on what you can control. We often spend our energy trying to manage things controlled by fate, while ignoring what's actually within our power. Live immediately means focusing on present actions instead of worrying about what might happen tomorrow. For Seneca, the best way to face hardship is not to wait for a better time, but to act wisely and courageously right now, because the future is never certain. What did Marcus Aurelius mean by be like a rock? Marcus Aurelius used the metaphor of a rock to describe inner strength and calmness in the face of constant hardship. Here's what he meant: steadfast in the midst of chaos. Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved and the raging sea falls still around it. This means that even when life is full of chaos and problems, you have the ability to remain internally calm and unshaken. The power of perception. Being like a rock is deeply connected to how you interpret events. Marcus believed that we can endure anything, as long as our mind sees it as endurable. When you frame hardship as something natural or even useful, it loses its power to disturb you. Refusing to be disturbed. You don't have to turn every event into a problem. Not everything deserves your emotional reaction. By being like a rock, you choose not to be shaken by things that don't affect your character or values. Enduring with virtue. Being unshaken doesn't mean being passive. It means continuing to act with purpose step by step. When one path is blocked, you calmly shift to another action aligned with discipline, justice, and wisdom. To be like a rock is to master your inner world, so that the storms outside cannot break your mental strength or your character. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved and the raging sea falls still around it. Life is hard. Suffering is part of being human, but you still have the power to choose how you respond. Stop waiting, stop complaining, and start acting with clarity and courage right now. Because in the end, you can endure anything your mind decides is endurable. Thank you for watching. Stay strong and start living with intention today.